if you're in the space of B2B lead generation and you're thinking about running cold email campaigns as well as LinkedIn campaigns, I'm going to share with you something that not a lot of people, I don't think in the West know about. So one of the things that we do is we hire from developing economies, let's say, for a lot of the technical side of what we do. And as it turns out, and this is the tip if you're in the space of cold email or LinkedIn lead generation, is as well as potentially even SEO, but for example, if you use G Suite as a platform to run cold email campaigns, you'll know that G Suite currently, or Google Workspace rather, currently costs in the region of £5 to £10. You'll know per month per domain or per Google Workspace rather. You'll also know if you look at LinkedIn lead generation, you'll typically make a purchase of LinkedIn Sales Navigator. And depending upon the type of subscription that you purchase, it works as costing anything to the effect of maybe between, let's say, £50 to £70. So as it turns out, there's a very well-established reseller marketplace that exists in developing economies. And that's something that we have used and taken advantage of, honestly, at Pearl Lemon, where you can get Google Workspaces for literally half price, and you can get LinkedIn Sales Navigator accounts for literally $25 per month per account. And we run these actively on the campaigns that we run for clients. Now, there's two parts to this. Part number one is obviously do that. And what you'll find if you've watched any of my other videos is that I'm a big fan of getting ultimately part of our hiring or our recruitment from developing economies, because they're very industrious people and they'll often find cheaper ways to do the same thing that you're trying to do, because they'll say, oh, I've got a piece of JavaScript for that, or I've got access to this database that's floating around in these Facebook groups. So we are all, let's say, cognitively aware of these things, but it's again about that saving of time, because then you have to go into a Facebook group, put a status update, you get 17 LinkedIn WhatsApp messages. You don't know who's professional and who isn't. But if you have and what sits underneath this, because you can do this directly yourself, but if you have your one ultimately trusted hire who works on data and web scraping, they will oftentimes already be part of or come from this ecosystem, because that's how they're scraping data at scale anyway. So what you'll often then see is that in these marketplaces, there'll be people that share. So in SEO, there's something, and if you have been involved in any of these forums, you'll know something called group buy. And it's the whole consequence of the power of the group means that you can bring down the price of a subscription. And then people sometimes tend to share login. So this exists also with corporate tools, being frank. So Zoom Info, people will have a login and then they'll use a piece of JavaScript to scrape the publicly accessible data, because there's some tools where they charge you per credit download, but they don't charge you per view. So then they'll employ pieces of Python, they'll employ Python scripts potentially to start scraping data. So the initial point with this, when you're thinking about the rising cost of tools potentially, and the side note is that there's lots of course, if you're not aware, lifetime deals that you can purchase, and there's also a reseller market for lifetime deals. So a simple example is if you're thinking that we use, for example, Mailshake, it's one of the tools that we use, and they're now a multi-million-dollar company. They had a lifetime deal several years ago that doesn't exist anymore. We were lucky in that we were able to get a lifetime deal at that time. So we pay $9 a month, or maybe zero, but I remember it being $9 a month for having access to 30 domains that we can run on Mailshake. So that has kept our costs incredibly low procedurally. Now, what's interesting is that several years later, if you bound around in certain groups, Mailshake lifetime deals actually still exist and people resell them. So it's a really interesting space to look into when you're thinking, we looked at it because of economies of scale. How can we run campaigns at scale more cost effectively? But even if you're an individual, you can take advantage of all of these things and bring down a lot of your operating costs, especially as we said with Google Workspace as well as LinkedIn. But then I would say that the sky's the limit, given the Zoom Info account that we do pay for a premium account, by the way, for all of these tools. But back when we were beginning, before we scaled, this was the approach that we took. And being frank, if you're a scrappy bootstrapping business owner, then there's no reason why you can't investigate some of these areas yourself. Of course, you do so at your own risk, but we've done it historically. It has worked. In some cases, we still do it. So I absolutely advocate exploring something like this, because you'll be pleasantly surprised by how quickly you can bring down any of your subscription costs for tools that you use regularly.